Welcome back to Think Time. And seeing as some of you seem to prefer me sitting in my chair banging on about all kinds of opinions, I thought I'd try something different on the same lines. So indeed we're going to be looking at prototypes that should have been built, or would have been fun to build, at least. And let me put that into perspective, because some prototypes do get built. For example, my FJ Cruiser was I believe was a Californian design for Toyota, and again, like the Audi TT, it was kind of expensive to build because it wasn't designed to be a production car. So these models rarely last very long. But they're prototypes that the public cried out for so much that the manufacturer decided to go ahead anyway. So if you've got any more examples of those, please do leave them in the comments. Prototypes that made it into production because of public demand. But we're going to be looking at some of the more wacky ones that never did. Well, of course we're starting with the Stratos, but not this one, the actual concept car. Yes, the incredible Stratos Zero. As we all know by now, penned by the amazing Marcello Gandini at Bertone. In an attempt to win Lancia's favour, Bertone created the Zero and famously drove it under the barrier into the factory. At the risk of telling you stuff you already know, it was based actually on the chassis of a Lancia Fulvia, a rally car that had crashed, and it used the 4-pot engine from that car, producing a little over 110 horsepower, so not a massively powerful car, but then it was just a design exercise, and what an amazing design. First shown to the world at the 1970 Turin Motor Show, caused quite a stir, as you can imagine. Whether it's as aerodynamic as it looks, I don't think anyone's bothered to find out actually. That fantastic rear louvered engine cover hid the 4-cylinder, and entrance to the cockpit was via the entire front windshield, lifting up from the front. Strangely, I think they would have hinged it at the front and lift it up from the back. Whatever, that's the way they did it. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now and let you enjoy some pictures of this amazing car, which you've probably seen before already, but there we go. And of course, before you all start chiming in with prototypes that were actually built, or concept cars, whatever, of course there's the Alfa Romeo Montreal, because another Gandini Bertone masterpiece. So a couple more shots of the Zero before we move on to, yes, what's that in the background? Yes, a Ferrari. We're actually going to be looking at a couple of offerings from Ferrari, but we're starting off with a Modulo. Modulo? I don't know. Anyway, what a stunning car. Photographed side by side with the Zero because it's of exactly the same era. Unveiled at the Geneva show in 1970. But it is not a Bertone. No. Pininfarina. And therefore not Gandini. A chap called Paolo Martin. Like the Zero, an astonishingly low roofline and no doors. Just the same, you climb in kind of through the windscreen, or where the windscreen was. With the Modulo, it pushes forward rather than lifting up, and of course reveals an even cooler cockpit. Look at those seats are so cool. The dashboard's quite conventional, I suppose. Conventional analog dials, at least. One of the things I particularly like about this car is the wheel covers, or semi-covered wheels. Not seen that before, really. Amazing looking car altogether. And whilst the Zero had that tiny little 4-pot motor that propelled it to around 120 miles an hour, I think, this beast has a V12 from the Ferrari 512S. Yeah, proper sports car, Le Mans race car, Daytona. So in theory it was about a 3-second 0 to 60 and over 200 miles an hour. That's a proper prototype if ever there was one. And as I said, there are 2 Ferrari prototypes that I would like to have seen in production. This one maybe not quite so crazy, and it kind of did make it into production in some shape or form. Yes, of course, it's another Bertone, and it's Mr. Gandini again. The Runabout. And how much fun would this be? As you can probably tell, it was the inspiration behind the X19 when seen by Fiat executives. They decided to take it a step further. So it kind of went into production. But what a fun little car. Just love that speedster fly screen type windscreen. So cool. And mounting the lights on the top bar, on the rollover bar effectively. How cool is that? I mean, wouldn't this be so much fun to drive? And talking of where it ended up, i.e. the X19, I'm just wondering, could you take an X19 and create one of these out of it? Wouldn't that be cool? So that's it for Ferrari, for me anyway, at this point. I know they created lots of other prototypes, especially recently, but we're kind of looking into the past here. And talking of which, we're going to move on to Aston Martin. And does this qualify as a prototype? I mean, in theory it is a production car. They produced one. For me, that doesn't really count. Yes, the Aston Martin Bulldog was supposed to be the first production car to achieve over 200 miles an hour, and it never did. Well, until recently. Obviously it's pretty radical, based on its Lagonda sister. And the really interesting thing about this, in terms of the fact that it was actually produced and sold, it ended up in the hands of none other than Mr. Jim Carpenter from IDR. Yes, my buddy Jim. How cool is that? And here he is with it. So I left it out of the Ultimate Wedge episode just because I knew I was going to throw it into this one. And as I say, I don't think you can really count it as a production car just because they produced one. Obviously everything we've looked at so far has been produced, including the Zero, the Modulo and the Runabout. Anyway, as far as I'm aware, it did not achieve the 200 miles an hour it was supposed to in its original guise, but just recently some nutcase like me bought it and has actually achieved that. It has a V8 5 litre twin Garrett turbocharged motor, which now propels it to over 200 miles an hour. So that's pretty cool, and it's pretty rad. So they should have just produced it. Moving swiftly on to one of my favourite marques, Corvette. Yes, and so many to choose from, honestly. I have to say, although there are all the revered Italian design houses like Bertone and Pininfarina, the Americans get seriously carried away with their prototypes. Yeah, obviously one of my personal favourites is the Mako Shark, because I modelled my 69 Stingray on the paint job, or tried to at least. Beautiful car, which of course ended up being kind of the C3 Corvette. But in the meantime, and kind of at the same time, they were exploring mid-engined Corvettes, which they've now finally produced some 40 years later. And there were a lot of variations on the mid-engine Corvette exploration. This particular one had a rotary engine, and it actually ended up in the UK, and as far as I'm aware, it's still owned by a friend of mine, Mr. Tom Falconer. He used to run a Corvette sales and servicing shop in the very unlikely named Snodland in Kent, and he was fortunate enough to get hold of this prototype, restore it, and as I say, I'm not sure if he's still got it. I'll try and find out and leave a comment or something. But anyway, yeah, what a special car to have. However, it's not my favourite. My favourite is this one. I think it's just beautiful. It kind of shares some of the lines of the Mako C3 type deal. Beautiful, beautiful curves, and if only they'd produced this car back then. Being of that era, you can tell some styling cues from the C3, the original Stingray, that back window, the front, obviously that shark nose. Yeah, just beautiful. Although clearly they ran out of imagination or budget by the time they got to the back and just slapped on a couple of lights. Yeah, could do better. And on that note, for this time around, I think we'll call it a day. I know we've only covered 4 marques altogether, and there's plenty more to come. So suggestions are always welcome in the comments down below. We can have a look at stuff together and work out another series episode on prototypes that should have been made. We're going to be looking at some French stuff next time around as well, because they're quite wacky, the French, and we love the French, us Brits. Anyway, so as always, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe down here somewhere, give the video a thumbs up, and of course encourage others to watch my lunacy.